In the different types of operating system, we have seen what do you mean by task, what do you mean by process, and what are the different functionalities performed by the real-time kernel, task, control block, all those things we have seen. These are the different functionalities. So we need to start it from this particular slide, that is hard real-time system and a soft real-time system. Okay. So hard real-time system, any operating system which is working with respect to time is said to be a hard real-time system. Means that particular real-time system or a real-time embedded system should work with respect to time and should process and produce the relevant output within the time stipulated time. So suppose if there is any deviation with respect to the time, then what it will happen is there will be a damage that can happen with respect to the embedded system. There can be losses with respect to the end user who is utilizing the hard real-time system, all those things. So a hard real-time system or an embedded system is said to be a hard real-time system if it is working or if it is executing its operation within the stipulated amount of time. So it follows a principle called as a late answer is a wrong answer. So whatever the operation that you need to perform, it should be performed within the time limit and it should execute and produce the output. So suppose if the processing time of the embedded system is more, okay, if it is taking more time for its operation than the stipulated time, even though if the processed output is correct, the output will not be considered as a correct output. It will be considered as a wrong output, means deviated output. So according to the slogan, a late answer is a, one second, a late answer is a wrong answer. So one a good example for this airbag system in a car. So when does the airbag system in a car will be released? So in case of any accidents or in case of any emergency, for the person who is sitting in the driver's seat, no harm should occur, right? So for that purpose, we'll be keeping an airbag inside that particular place. Okay, so that is an example of a hard real-time system. So if I'm designing an embedded system such that the airbag should open during the emergency time, there should not be any harm that should be taking place with respect to the person who's sitting in the driver's seat. So suppose if the accident is going to happen, before that only the airbag will open. So it is nothing but within the stipulated time, the system should guess what it is going to, what it is going on, and it will produce the airbag there. So suppose if there is any delay in the means releasing of the airbag, what happens? There may be a loss. Means uh, the person can get affected, he may be harmed due to the accident, all those things will happen. So missing that particular deadline is missing a particular deadline in the sense, making the system to operate within the stipulated time is said to be a good real-time system. If we are exceeding the time limit, then it is said to be missing a deadline. So it will result in a permanent data loss or irrecoverable damages for the end user. Okay, a late answer is always a wrong answer. This is the slogan or the principle which is followed by the hard real-time system. So similarly, one more example of a hard real-time system is an anti-lock brake system. So for each and every today's four-wheelers, this ABS will be applicable, that is anti-lock brake system. ಅಂದರೆ ಒಂದ್ಸತಿ ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ಅಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಸೇಮ್ ಪ್ರೆಷರ್ 4 ವೀಲ್ಸ್ ಮೇಲೂ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಅಂದರೆ 4 ವೀಲ್ಸ್ ಮೇಲೂ ಒಂದೇ ಸತಿ ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಪ್ರೆಷರ್ ಹಾಕಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಗಾಡಿ ಸ್ಟಾಪ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಆಂಟಿಲಾಕ್ ಬ್ರೇಕಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಹೌ ಇಟ್ ಆಪರೇಟ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಸಪೋಸ್ ಈಗ ಆಂಟಿಲಾಕ್ ಬ್ರೇಕಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮು ಅಷ್ಟೇ, ಏನಾದರೂ ಒಂದು ವೀಲಿಗೆ ಪ್ರೆಷರ್ ಮಿಸ್ ಮ್ಯಾಚ್ ಆಯಿತು ಅಂದರೆ, ಈಗ 2 ವೀಲಿಗೆ ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಆಯಿತು, ಇನ್ನೆರಡು ವೀಲಿಗೆ ಆಗಲಿಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಥರ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ there may be a mismatch or it can harm the operation of it can harm it means it can harm the end user, those who is applying that particular ABS or using that ABS system. So hard real time systems must execute whatever its operation is within the stipulated amount of time. It should not deviate from that. Okay, so whenever you are considering any embedded system to be operating on real time parameters, if it should execute within the stipulated amount of time, then it is categorized as a hard real time system. So similarly, you have one more real time system which is called as soft real time system. So soft real time system ಅಂದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಏನು, even that is also a real time system, means even that is also an embedded system which will be working on the real time parameters. ನೀವಾಗ ಇನ್ಪುಟ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀರಾ, ಅದರ ಪ್ರಕಾರನೇ ಔಟ್ಪುಟ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. But what is the difference between hard real time and a soft real time system? Yes. In case of hard real time system, whatever the input that you are going to give, it should be working within a stipulated amount of time. Means once the time gets over, whatever the processed output will not be having any value. But that is not the case in case of this soft real time system. Even the operation is little bit late, if the answer is correct, the answer is acceptable. Okay, that is what. So missing deadlines in case of this soft real time system is acceptable to certain extent. So here this soft real time system follows the principle as a late answer is an acceptable answer, but it could have been done bit faster. Usually this soft real time systems will be operated with the intervention of human. Okay, so means in case of hard real time system, depending upon the situation, the system will take an what the system will judge whether that particular operation should be done or not. But here in case of this soft real time system, it is there should be a human within the loop or in an execution of any soft real time system. One example is automatic teller machine, that is ATM. ಈಗ ನಾವು ಇನ್ಪುಟ್ ರಿಯಲ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಪಾಸ್ವರ್ಡು, ಅಮೌಂಟು, ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸಾಕ್ಷನ್ನು, ಆ ಥರ ಏನೇನು ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ಇಫ್ ದರ್ ಈಸ್ ಸರ್ಟನ್ ಡಿಲೇ ವಿತಿನ್ ದ ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಸ್ಟಿಪ್ಯುಲೇಟೆಡ್ ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಟೈಮ್, ದಟ್ ಡಸಂಟ್ ಮ್ಯಾಟರ್ ಹಿಯರ್. Okay, whatever even if the operation is taking a bit longer time for its execution, that doesn't give any loss here. Okay, maybe the transaction time limit might be crossed out, but that doesn't harm the end user. Okay, you can redo the transaction once again. So this soft real time system accepts the processing of the operation with certain delay with it. So one more example of a soft real time system is an audio video playback system. So even if it takes certain amount of time for playing the audio or for playing the video, that doesn't matter. So it depends upon ಈಗ ನಾವೇನಾದ್ರೂ input ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ, play this particular song or play this particular video song or play this particular audio song. So even if there is a delay within the time of its execution, or by the time of its execution, there is no harm or there is no difficulties or there is no grievances that will be faced by the end user. So such category of system is said to be soft real time system. So we have two different types of real time system. One is hard real time system and the other one is soft real time system. So next you have threads. So thread is not, so we have seen task, we have seen process. Next we will see thread. So thread is nothing but it is a part of a task. So just a second. So now here you have threads. So a thread is a primitive task that can execute code. So we have seen task, we have seen process. Both task and process are a part of a program. Means even process is said to be a set of instructions which are executing. A task is said to be a part of a process. Means even task is also a part of a program. Even similarly, thread we have. Thread is also a primitive task which will be executed by a process, and it is also a part of a process. So thread are single sequential flow of control within a process. They are also called as light weighted process. So suppose if I am considering this as a thread, okay, within a process I have this thread. So suppose a program I have, within a program I can use some different functions, okay. Those functions I can call it as a thread. So suppose if I have some 1 to some 100 instructions, okay. So in between I am calling a function for adding certain numbers, okay, and I can call one more function, okay, for multiplying some numbers. So these are functions, you know, right? Set of instructions which are used to reduce the code, and set of instructions which are executed again and again will be written in the form of a function, okay. So the functions here I am considering one for addition and one for multiplication. So this complete thing is called as a process, okay. Within the process I have a task to perform the addition operation and to perform the multiplication operation. I'll be writing a separate set of instructions to perform the addition operation in the form of a function. Similarly, I'll write certain set of instructions for performing the multiplication operation in the form of a function. So this, whatever the function that you are writing, that will be considered as a thread. Even this is, whatever the function that you are calling here, even this is also considered as a thread, okay. So now I think so you might be able to understand what do you mean by thread. So thread, I can just tell you that these are the functions which are called within a program. If I am considering the complete program as a process, whatever it can be a built-in function or it can be a user defined function, okay. These functions can be a built-in function, these functions can be user defined functions. Those things are called as threads. So in a program you can have a single function, or in a program you can have a multiple functions. Similarly, in a process you can have a single thread which is called as single thread process. In a process you can have multiple threads which is called as multiple thread process. So suppose if I have a single thread in a program, if I have a single function to be executed, I have a set of registers and a set of stack memory which is completely utilized only by this single thread. E-register, so this is only for this thread, and the stack memory is also used only for this thread. But you have same code memory, same data memory, and same set of header files or some predefined files which will be used by the process. It will be same for the thread as well, because thread is a part of a process. Similarly, in case I told you in a process you can have many threads as well. So many threads, suppose if I have here thread 1, thread 2 and thread 3. So three threads I have, it is nothing but three different functions which within a program. This thread will have its own set of registers and stack memory that is different from the second thread, and that is different from the third thread. So but the code and the data and the files which are supported by the process will be same for all these three different threads. I hope you understand. For a thread, the stack memory and the register set will be unique from one to other. ಈಗ ನಾನು ತ್ರೀ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಥ್ರೆಡ್ಸ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ತ್ರೀ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಸೆಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ ಏರಿಯಾಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಅಲೋಕೇಟೆಡ್. Three different set of registers will be used by three different threads, that is subprograms or subfunctions. But whatever the code memory that I have, whatever the data memory I have, whatever the files that I'm using for supporting, it will be common for all the threads that are defined within a process. So multi threads can be used by the process or can be used by the task. So see here the same thing I told you, the data memory and the code memory, it will be same for a process. So suppose if I have a process here and I have some three different threads, T1, T2 and T3. Okay, so this T1, T2, T3 will be using the same set of data memory and the code memory, but T1 will be using the different set of stack memory with different register set, and T2 will be utilizing different set of stack memory, and T3 will be using the next set of stack memory. With respect to memory organization of a process, the code memory and the data memory will be same for all the threads that is operating within a process, but the stack memory and the register set will be different for the individual threads. Next, what is the uses of multi-threading? In multi-threading, in the advantage, the best memory utilization means as multiple threads are executing at the same time, same address space can be utilized for data. So see here, I'm using three, I'm executing three set of multiple threads, but the same data space I'm using and the same code space I'm using. So there is no need of means that there is no need of providing different code area and different data memory area for the three different threads. The same thing can be used. So better memory utilization, which will reduce the complexity of the thread communication. If I want from one function, I can communicate to the other function, right? Similarly, if I want to pass certain information from one thread to the other thread, then I can communicate as I'm using the memory efficiently. Even the threads can, and I'm using the data memory, code memory commonly. So the communication between from one thread to other thread can also be taken place in a better way. So speed execution of the process. So whenever we are going for multi-threading process, the speed of execution of the process can be utilized in a better way, because suppose in this case only I can tell you. So if the thread 1 is using resource 1, okay, and if the thread 2 your needs for resource 1, so once the completion of this resource 1, it can go for using the second thread can go for resource 1, usage of resource 1. So similarly, during the same process, if I want to use some other resource during the same time only, the thread 3 can utilize the operation of a other resource. So here means during the same time, more number of operations will be taking place. The speed of execution of the process will be in a higher manner. If one thread is waiting for the resource, meanwhile the other thread will not wait. It can get the access of other resources and it can execute its operation. So there will be an efficient CPU utilization, as CPU will be engaged all the time in the execution of one or the other thread in multi-threading operations. So as I told you, see here, process with multi-thread. So if I'm considering this is a complete process, I told you you'll be having a same data and the code memory for all the threads here. So thread 1, thread 2 and thread 3. So see here, so this is a different function, this is a different function, and this is a different function. This stack and registers are the different set which are unique with respect to thread 1, and these are unique with respect to thread 2, and these are unique with respect to thread 3 here. So I have some functions here. So usually the first thread will be the main thread which will be executing the main part of the program. The main part of the program, usually it will be starting with void main. So this will be the main part of the thread, and within that how many ever the functions I am calling, those functions. So see here, thread 2. So thread 2 is this one. So from thread 1 I can communicate to thread 2, means calling a function in the main function. So from here I can do this set of operations by utilizing the stack and registers, and I can come back to the main thread. So there is intercommunication, there is communication between the threads as well. This can be done in an effective way when we are going for multi-thread operation. So I hope you understand with what do you mean by thread, what do you mean by multi-thread within a process, and how the communication will take place. So we have seen threads and multi-threads. What are the different types of threads and multi-threads that can be used here? We have threads or the set of functions which are defined at the user level, and set of functions which are defined at the kernel level. So whatever the functions or the threads which are defined at the user level, there won't be any support by the kernel provided to the user level threads. Means the operating system does not support any user level threads. So user level threads will be operating according to the instructions given by the user itself. The OS will not interfere within the functionalities which is defined by the user. So similarly, with respect to the kernel, there are certain predefined functionalities which are defined by the kernel, which are called as threads, and those threads can be called within the process how many ever the times the user needs. ಈಗ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಒನ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್, ಈಗ ಥ್ರೆಡ್ ಅಂತ ಕರೆಯೋ ಬದಲು ನಾನು ಅದನ್ನು ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಕರೆದ್ರೆ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ಇನ್ ಅ ಬೆಟರ್ ವೇ. ಈಗ ಯೂಸರ್ ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಫಂಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಈಗ ಸಪೋಸ್ ನಾನು ಅಡಿಷನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ, ಮಲ್ಟಿಪ್ಲಿಕೇಶನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಸೊ ಈಗ ಅಡಿಷನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನೇ ಸೆಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಬರಿತೀನಿ. ಸೊ ಇಂಟ್ ಎ ಇಸ್ ಈಕ್ವಲ್ ಟು ಬಿ ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಸಿ ಅಂದರೆ ನಾನಿಲ್ಲಿ ಎರಡು ಇನ್ಪುಟ್ ತೊಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ, ಬಿ ಮತ್ತು ಸಿ ಅಂತ. ದೋಸ್ ಥಿಂಗ್ಸ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಆ್ಯಡಿಂಗ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ಸೆಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಇಟ್ and I'm storing the value into a, and I'll be returning that value, return a, return integer I'll be doing to the main program. So this is a user defined thread. Here the OS will not change the functionality whatever the user is defining. So similarly, suppose if I want to find square root of a function, so square root is an inbuilt function which is defined, and this particular function will be having set of instructions to find the square root of a number which you are sending as an input or an argument through the functional. So this is a kernel defined thread or a operating system defined thread. Okay. So multi-threads in the use, whenever you are defining a process in terms of user level threads, all the multi-threads are considered as a single thread. But here in case of this operating system level, the multi-level threads are considered in a different threads. ಈಗ ಒಂದೇ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವೀಗ 3 different threads ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ವಲ್ಲ. So if it is an operating system defined process, all these considered as 3 different threads. If it is user defined process, then all these threads are considered as a single process thread, means single thread process. So next, user level threads are non-preemptive at thread level. There are two different types of techniques of execution of any program. One is preemptive and the other one is non-preemptive. Preemptive is nothing, non-preemptive is nothing but suppose if this thread is executing, the operating system will wait for the complete time until the execution of the thread 1 takes place. Once the execution is completed, then only the processor will go for executing the second thread. So this is non-preemptive. But in case of preemptive, there is a different technique which is followed, and that preemptive technique will be followed by this kernel level threads. So I'll tell you what do you mean by preemptive. So this preemptive technique will be depending upon will execute with respect to time and with respect to priority. So suppose if I have thread 1 and if I have thread 2, thread or task, okay, if I have task 1 or task 2, this task may take some 2 milliseconds for its execution, and this task may take some 8 milliseconds. So first kernel, what it will see, it will see the execution time of both the tasks. Whichever the task or the thread it is utilizing or taking less amount of time, that particular task will be executed first. So first T1 will be executed, later on T2 will execute. Okay. So similarly, this is with respect to time. Okay. Otherwise, if I have priority, if the kernel is considering this thread should be executed first as the priority is high, then T2 will be executed first, later on only T1 will be executed. So these are preemptive, means while executing with respect to time or with respect to priority, the execution of the threads can change and it will complete the particular process execution here. So this is about the different types of threads. So these are the some of the differences between thread and the process. Just a second. So thread is a single unit of execution and it is a part of the process. So process is a program in execution and contains one or more threads. Thread is a part of a process. So thread ಒಂದೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. Process ಅಲ್ಲಿ more than one thread ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಒಂದೇ thread ಇರುತ್ತೆ. I told you a process has its own code memory, data memory and stack memory, whereas thread it will be using the data memory and code memory of the process only, but separate heap memory, that is nothing but stack memory, and the register set will be used with respect to individual threads. So the thread cannot be executed or cannot leave independently. It should depend upon the process. Means the function cannot be executed independently. It should be called by the main function. Then only the function gets executed. But the program or the process can have at least one thread. At least one thread will be the main program thread here. So there can be multiple threads in a process. The first thread will be the main function. I told you here, always the first thread will be the main function and the next threads will be the sub functionalities which are called within the main function. Next, threads are very inexpensive to create and process is very expensive to create. Context switching is inexpensive and fast. Context switching is complex. What do you mean by context switching? I'll tell you. I told you here, I can call the thread 2 within the thread 1 and I can execute this thread 2 and I can come back to thread 1. Means the communication between the functions which are defined within the same program can be possible. So this is called as context switching. From here it will go to switch to the second thread. It will execute that, it will execute and it will update the whatever the register status or whatever the expressions or whatever the output status, it will and it will come back to the main program. So this is nothing but context switching. It can be fast and it is inexpensive in the thread. But within a process, if you want to call some other process or some other program, it may be complex, but it can be done. A thread expires, if a thread expires, its stack is reclaimed by the process. So suppose if I'm executing this thread, okay, and if the operation of this stack or the thread is over, then this register and the stack area will be released by the thread such that this register set and the stack memory can be uh, utilized for the new thread which will be coming into picture, or it can be managed by the process only. It can be adjusted for the next multiple task or the thread which is executing here. So next we will see what do you mean by task scheduling. So task and the told you in a program we can have n number of threads. So task is also called as a thread or thread. Synonymously you can call task and thread are the same. It is used to perform certain operation, right? So even thread will also perform the same set of operation, task will also perform the same set of operation, but whatever the things that are given for the task, that is different stack memory, different register set, may not be same for the task. Okay, that is only the difference. Rest of all the things will be the same. So multitasking involves switching execution switching among different tasks. I told you from one thread you can go back to the other thread, you can execute and come back to the main program. So all those things, execution mechanism, when you are handling more than one task or one thread, there should be certain process, there should be certain methodology which has to be followed by the operating system. Means which particular thread has to be executed first, which particular task has to be executed next. So that process, that thing is called as task or process scheduling. So there are certain guidelines or the policies which are to be followed, and those will be implemented by the algorithm which will be run by the operating system. So operating system is the key maker or the key holder for executing the different set of tasks which are existing within a process. So that algorithm is known as a scheduler. I told you there are two different types of scheduling, preemptive scheduling and non-preemptive scheduling. So preemptive scheduling is nothing but whatever the task that is executing, that means suppose one, just an example I can give you here. I had already explained this here. So suppose if this is the task 1 and this is the task 2. If the operating system or kernel is executing this particular task of a process, it will complete its execution and then it goes for the second task or the second thread, or means the currently executing task or the process is allowed to run until it terminates, means until the completion of its execution takes place, or enters into wait state for waiting of an, if it wants any resources in between its execution. If the resources are available, then those resources will be given to the particular task, or if the resources are not available, it will go into the wait state. So once the resources are given and the execution is completed, then it goes to the next thread. So that is non-preemptive scheduling. So what do you mean by preemptive scheduling? Preemptive in the sense you can stop that at any point of time. So the current executing task, process or the thread is preempted by another task which is ready for its operation, depending upon two different parameters I told you, depending upon time or depending upon the priority. So suppose if you are executing certain instruction, in between if you want to, if some other task is invoked by the operating system which has higher priority, then whatever the current execution is there, that will be stopped. It will go to the prioritized, operating system prioritized task or the process. It will execute and it will come back. So this is stopping it temporarily. This process execution is stopped temporarily. It will go and it will execute the other part of the process, or a different process which is which is having higher priority than this. So with respect to task scheduling, we need to consider different factors here. One is CPU utilization, throughput, turnaround time, waiting time, and the response time. So just one example, I'll brief about all these things. They'll ask you related to this task scheduling, they'll ask you the problems. There are two different algorithms which are followed here. So with respect to those algorithms, they'll ask you to find the throughput, they'll ask you to find the turnaround time, response time, and waiting time. So first we'll see what are these and then we'll move on to the problems here. So CPU utilization, in the sense whatever the scheduled algorithm is there, the scheduled algorithm should always make the CPU utilization high. So suppose if you have four different threads within a process, all the four different threads for which resources it is asking for its execution, all the resources it should be kept ready for efficient utilization of a CPU. So CPU utilization is the direct measure of how much percent of CPU is utilized, is best utilized. Next, throughput. So throughput is an indication of the number of processes executing per unit of time. Within this amount of time, how many threads are executed, or within this amount of time, how many processes executed. Usually, more number of processes should be executed within a limited amount of time. So it is nothing but the throughput is high. So the throughput of a good scheduler should always be high. Next, you have something called as turnaround time. So it is nothing but the complete time taken by the thread or the process to complete its execution. So the amount of time taken by the process for completing its execution. It can take the process, the time spent by the process for waiting, and the time spent in the ready queue, means waiting time plus execution time will gives you the turnaround time. Okay, so but usually for any process the turnaround time should be minimum. Next, waiting time is nothing but, suppose if one process is executing, and even if the other process is ready for its execution, it should wait until the complete operation of the first process gets over. So that waiting period is called as the waiting time. Even if it is ready, it should wait for its execution. So the amount of time spent by the process in the ready queue waiting for the CPU to get its execution done. Usually it should be minimum. Next, we have something called as response time. It is the time elapsed between the submission of the process and the first response. It is nothing but as soon as we give the input, how much time it will take for processing and giving you the output. So in order to make a particular or a good scheduling algorithm, we need to design an algorithm such that it should have high CPU utilization, minimum turnaround time, maximum throughput, and least response time. So if all these parameters are satisfied by the scheduling algorithm, then the effective execution of the process can be taken place. So these are the different types of techniques which are followed. One is called as SJF scheduling or shortest time. Next, you have round robin scheduling. So shortest remaining time is nothing but how many ever the process you have, all the process will be having its own execution time. So depending upon the execution time, this particular algorithm shortest remaining time will be executed. Next, you have round robin scheduling that will be following some different process. So related to these two different algorithms, they'll be asking you to calculate the different these parameters, throughput, the waiting time, all those things they'll ask you to calculate. So first we'll see what do you mean by SJF scheduling. SJF is also called as shortest remaining time scheduling here. So suppose if I have a process one which is executing and it is ready for its execution. During its execution, when another process comes into picture which utilizes less amount of time than process one, then the scheduler algorithm will execute the process 2 and then it will execute the process 1. So suppose let me explain you with an example. If the process 1 is taking about some 10 nanoseconds for its execution, and if this is the first process that is coming into the ready queue for its execution. Now the operating system, what it will do, it will come here, it will pick the first particular process, whatever it is, and it will start executing. So during its execution, if I have some other process which comes into picture which utilizes some 2 nanoseconds, then what it will do, the execution of the present process will be stopped. The operating system will goes to execute the the second process which has less amount of time for its execution. It completes its execution and next the process 1 will come into picture for its execution from the part wherever it has been left before. I hope you understand. If you have n number of process, this particular algorithm, it will see for which particular process it takes less amount of time for its execution. That particular process will be executed first and the next going on all the other process with respect to its execution time, one after the other the operating system will execute all the processes until the end of the time slots. So throughput, turnaround time, all those things I had already explained you. Just in brief, throughput is nothing but the processor that completes the process, the time taken by the process to complete within the time. Turnaround time is the total amount of time required to complete a particular process. Next, average turnaround is minimum average amount of time required to complete all the process here. Waiting time is nothing but how much time it has been waited in the queue for execution of the process. Average waiting time is the time taken by all the processes, the waiting time taken by all the processes when it is waiting in the ready queue list. Response time is amount of time it takes for the request and submitted and until the first response is produced. So next, this is one example where I'm telling you. So suppose if P1, P2, P3 are the three different processes we have at 0. Okay, so let me consider this as 0 here. This is the process time this will be the time. So at 0th point, so first it will say P1 it is taking 10 nanoseconds, P2 is taking 5 nanoseconds, P3 is taking 7 nanoseconds. According to shortest time scheduling method, first it will see which particular process will be utilizing less amount of time for its execution. So first here P2 is according to these three different processes, you have P2 which it is taking less amount of time. So at 0 the P2 will be initiated. So P2 is initiated at 0. What is the complete time taken by this? It will be totally 5 milliseconds. So from 0 to 5, that should be the minimum amount of time for executing the process. So but at 0 nanoseconds or 0 milliseconds, P2 has been scheduled here. During this scheduled process, during the execution of P2, there is one more process which comes into picture, and that particular process will take only 2 milliseconds. So now what the algorithm will do, it takes 5 milliseconds, but this take 2 milliseconds. So first, whatever the operation that the previous process was doing, that will be stopped, and it will execute the next process P4. So from 0 to 2, okay, this was 1 and this was 2, this was 5. Let me consider this. So from 0 to 2, P2 was executing. At 2, P4 will come into picture. So from what is the total time taken for its execution? 2 milliseconds. So 2 plus 2 is 4. So until 4, this particular process will be executed. That is P4 will execute. So after that, so the whatever P2 that was executing, it was preempted, it was stopped, and P4 will come into picture here. So that will be taking the time until 4 milliseconds. So once the P2 has been completed, see here at 4, that is at when the ready queue is at 4 milliseconds, P2 has been completed here. Now again, whatever the preempted process which you have, 0 to 2, it has already completed 2 milliseconds. So within 5 minus 2, it will be 3. So from 4 plus 3, it will be 7. So 4 plus 3 is 7. So until here, again the process will, P2 will complete its operation. So P2, whatever this 2 milliseconds was already utilized. So the remaining was 3 milliseconds. So that 3 milliseconds has been utilized here from 4 to 7. So now P2 execution will also be completed. Next, it will see the other two different process which I have. Next is with less amount of execution time is process P3. So from 7, it takes 7 more milliseconds for completing the execution of process P3. So 7 plus 7 is 14. So until this amount of time, P3 is scheduled and completed its operation. So at 7, P3 is scheduled, and at 14 P3 is completed. Next, the last process is P1, which takes 10 milliseconds, and it is scheduled at 14. So 14 plus 10 is 24. So it takes 14 to 24 milliseconds, that is 10 milliseconds for executing its process P1 operation. So here this is how the SJF scheduling process will be taking place. So the same thing I had explained you here. Same thing. So see here so this is called as the Gantt chart or the process chart. So they will give you only this much. Okay, this is what they'll give you. Okay, you need to write this particular chart. So depending upon the algorithm, you need to write which particular process will be executed, at what time it will be preempted, at what time the other task will come into picture, it will get executed, all those things. So this is called as Gantt chart. So if for whatever the problem they are asking, if you are getting a correct Gantt chart, then you can calculate whatever the parameters they'll ask you. So if you are ending up the wrong Gantt chart, then whatever the parameters that you are calculating will also be wrong. ಈ Gantt chart ತನಕ ನೀವು ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ half of the problem will be correct. Rest of the things you can calculate it by using the formulas. So waiting time first calculate. They'll ask you to calculate the average waiting time. So average waiting time is sum of all the waiting time for all the processes divided by the total number of processes. So according to here, the total number of processes is 4. So now I need to calculate what is the waiting time for each and every process. So with respect to, so from 0th, this thing, is there any time required for the process P2 for its execution? No, it has started from 0 only, but it has been ended at 2 milliseconds. Okay, so the waiting time was only 2 milliseconds. But as soon as the P4 has come into picture, it got its execution by the scheduler itself. So there was no time for its there is no waiting time for here. So with respect to P3, so P3 was initiated here. Okay, so what is the waiting time here? 3 plus 2 plus 2, that is 7. The total waiting time is 7 milliseconds. With respect to P1, so P1 had come into picture until here. So it is 7 plus 7, that is 14. So that is 14. So 2 plus 0 plus 7 plus 14. 2 plus 0 plus 7 plus 14 divided by total number of processes is 4. So the average waiting time for this process is 5.75 milliseconds. So similarly with respect to turnaround time. So turnaround time is nothing but the time taken for the process for its complete operation. So the time spent in the queue and the execution time. So for time spent in the queue here, it waited for 2 milliseconds. Then when it has got completed, waiting time plus the execution time. So waiting time was the execution time was 2 and the execution time was 3 and the waiting time was 2. So the complete will be 7. Similarly with respect to P4 it was 2 milliseconds. For P3 it is this 7 plus 7. Next for P1 it is 14. So sum of all these things divided by 4. So sorry, yeah, this is 14 plus 7 plus 7, it is 14. So sum of all these things, the execution time and the waiting time with respect to each and every process divided by the total number of process will give you this particular thing. So just I'll explain you in the next class about this once again, this turnaround time process, as there is no time now. So just I'll explain this particular problem in the next class as well. So just a second.